Hello, good morning. Happy Wednesday. It's Willow Legal Group Coffee Chat. And this week we are talking about what happens if you pass away without a plan. If you don't have a will, you don't have a trust, you've done nothing.
Which is a lot of, I would say 66% of the population, I think are the statistics, doesn't have anything.
So Lindsay, what happens?
Couple of things. I think we talked about incapacity planning before if you don't have documents. So I think we're specifically talking about if you don't have a will or a trust. So that's called dying intestate. And if you didn't make your own plan, your state has one for you. And in the state of Maryland, that determines who takes priority as far as administering your estate, your personal representative, but also how your assets are distributed and to who they go to. So there's a lot about that surprises people. So priority for personal representative goes to your spouse if you have one. That doesn't mean that your spouse has to serve as the personal representative. That just means that if your spouse applies to serve in that capacity, they are number one on the list if other people also apply. After that is your children, adult children, if you have some. If you don't have any of those, then there's a pecking order that I don't have 100% memorized. But I do know that if nobody steps forward, if you have any creditors, they can step forward. And so that would look like maybe you have some medical bills. Maybe you have some hospital bills. Maybe you have a credit card. Yeah. So your creditor could file to open an estate on your behalf, be named as the personal representative to oversee the administration, and then get paid out of whatever assets are in your estate. So I don't know that that is something I would want. Family member, sure, but a creditor, no. But it happens. And I guess that leads to what is in your probate estate. Yeah. So what is included in that?
I was thinking about the priority, right, of personal representatives. If you think of it sometimes, right, blended families.
Yeah.
What if, right, a step parent or, current spouse, but, there are kids, adult children, right? Priority goes to the spouse, and there could be some conflict there, and that type of thing. So family members, yes, in a kind of plain, straightforward way, but there are definitely times that it can be complicated, or if you have estranged family members, right? And you don't want them to manage your estate or be in charge of find out all that you have and where it is. So, so the next, right, is what's in your probate estate. So that would include anything in your name as individually. So if you own things in joint accounts, those accounts are automatically, they transfer to the joint owner. So whoever the other person is on the account, that doesn't go through probate. Anything with a payable on death or a beneficiary designation also doesn't go through the probate process. Small caveat is if you have named a minor child as a beneficiary, then that gets pulled back into the probate process. But assuming that you have named someone over the age of 18, all they have to do is show up with the death certificate, fill out paperwork, and that gets transferred automatically. What am I missing?
Real property. In your name alone. Same thing in most cases. So there's different types of joint ownership for real property. So it depends on the type of joint ownership. I think in most cases, it is going to go to the survivor, but there are some cases where you own it as 50-50 rather than what's called joint tenants. And then whatever your interest is, if it's 50%, that's going to go through the probate process. So if you own property with a sibling or a business partner, that's generally when it's going to end up in the probate process. Usually spouses, parent, child, in most cases, I think are joint tenancy. So it's one of those things you want to review. So I think it covers everything. Stocks, anything that doesn't have a beneficiary designation, and it has to have a valid beneficiary designation. So if you have named, for example, you named your spouse and your spouse predeceased you and you never updated your beneficiary, and you technically don't have a beneficiary.
Yeah.
So that's going to be pulled into your probate estate.
So then what happens? How do things get divided? And I think the most common myth we hear all the time, especially from folks with young kids, is I don't have to worry about this. It will all go to my spouse. And that's not true.
No.
That's not what the state default is. So if you have young kids and you don't have a will, that the assets are being split between the surviving spouse and the minor kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's also the case for blended families.
Yeah.
If you have adult kids, the only time in which everything goes to my spouse is in play is if you have adult children from the same marriage.
Right.
And so, those are the only families that say, well, you'd really be happy. You'd be okay, right? If something were to happen to you.
Right.
It would probably follow how you would want.
Right. But sometimes not.
Yeah.
Sometimes not. I'm trying to think, there was something else I was going to say. No, I forgot.
And so I think, right, when you're talking about minor kids, and let's talk about probate and minor kids receiving an inheritance, right? The court will set up a trust, and the kids won't inherit directly because they can't, right? It'll be held in trust until they're 21, and court, though, will pick who's the trustee. Sometimes there's reporting to the court that those trust funds are being used correctly. And so, even if you said, okay, not a big deal, I can split with my spouse, it'll be put in the trust for the kids, and my spouse, it'd be great if they'd be the trustee of the trust. But, right, what happens, like, if you really want your spouse to have to potentially do annual accountings to the court of how they're spending money for the joint kids, that's insane. No one wants to do that.
Right. And sometimes that you don't, I've had some clients who they don't necessarily want their spouse in charge of money because maybe they're not great with money. So it's very dependent on your personal circumstances, but you just have to be proactive and make a plan. If you have a circumstance that you want to make sure doesn't happen, we can make a plan for pretty much anything as long as it's not against the law. So,
and I think the other piece about dying without a will and blended families, I think, is where it gets really complicated with adult kids, because they're splitting it, right, with a step parent,
right?
That, who knows how long they've been in their life, right? Not a big deal if they've raised, grown up with this person, but if you get married again later in life and you have a, new spouse with adult kids, it just gets tricky for everybody, right? To make sure that it just gets tricky.
Right. And also, it's not like a divorce situation where they look at how long you've been married. For death purposes, it's, are you legally married to person? And if you are, then, and you don't have a plan, then that's what applies. So it's not like, well, these assets were pre-marriage and so they're separate. If there's no prenup, it's not treated like divorce. So again, you can keep them separate at death, but you have to have a plan.
Yeah. So that's the importance of having a plan and not letting the state be your default.
Yep. And next time we'll talk more about the actual probate process itself and, wills and things like that.
And how that all works.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Yay for August.
So we'll be out at National Night Out for the Olney Chamber of Commerce. That is at the Fairhill Shopping Center in Olney from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. It is an awesome family event. Bring your family and kids out. There will be all sorts of police demonstrations, all sorts of businesses giving out goodies, and
fire department will be there.
Yep. I think there's a DJ. I know
there's food.
Yeah. So it's a great time. Come stop by, say hi. We'll be out there. Doug will be out there. You get to meet Doug. And then after that, the following Tuesday, we are hosting Taco Tuesday here in the office. So join us for Tacos and Trusts, where we'll sit down, we'll enjoy some tacos and talk about all of this and talk about, what we're talking about here in our coffee chats, but in a much more detailed discussion, and be here to answer your questions.
So we hope to see you.
All right. Have a great
Good morning,
week.
Suzanne.